Hey everyone, Tyler here. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be doing a little lighting breakdown from a recent shoot that it was just for fun, but it was conveniently just up in my living room. Now, if I sound icky and nasally, I apologize. I'm getting over a cold, pretty nasty cold. So my throat's sore, all that kind of good stuff. Got tea here. I'm on the mend. But I sound worse than I really feel, but I'm gonna try to keep this brief for everybody's sake. So we're doing this lighting breakdown. My buddy Tyler, he is the Colorado gaffer. In fact, the last video I posted, you can find we were talking about what is a gaffer, and we kind of used the same set, but that set was really optimized for his video where he was filming a YouTube video talking about Diagram Master and SitusLink and how he builds out his lighting diagrams and all that kind of good stuff. So for this video, we're just going to be looking at the lighting and kind of how I lit the scene and some of the decisions that I made and maybe what I would have done differently if I would go back and film this again. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. And the first thing I did is obviously I found the framing that I wanted to go with. The whole idea is he wanted kind of this kind of natural looking living room vibe, something kind of really inviting. So that's kind of what I was going after here. So the first thing, I found the framing and was just shooting into the L of the room just to give me the most depth. And then there you can see on the left-hand side of the frame, I've got this big window there, and that is the motivation for our key light. Now for the key light, I use an Aputure 300D Mark II with a Glow-EZ XXL, I think is what it is. It's like a 60-inch softbox. It's awesome. Gives really nice, soft light, and you can actually push that light off a little bit further from the talent while maintaining that really soft quality of light because it's such a big light source. So I've got the 300D Mark II as the key light. Now I had to ND down quite a bit. I'm here on the Red Komodo on this shot, so just to expose for the window so everything outside wasn't super blown out. At the time when I was setting it up, the sky was really pretty and there's really pretty clouds, and then it kind of just went overcast, so whatever. The next thing that I did, and this is kind of like the theme of this video, I'd say, it was just balancing exposure. Now, because I was ND down so heavily, you have to do a lot for bringing up exposure in a room just to kind of balance out exposure, because otherwise this room would be super, super dark. And I've actually made a video on this before as well, and you can kind of see an example of what I mean. I'll link that up here. But the whole idea here was like, okay, I've got exposure on my talent. Now I need to figure out how to balance out this exposure in the room so that the room doesn't look super dark and moody. So it'll look kind of nice and natural and inviting like it does here. So everything else I did was basically balancing exposure with the exception of one light, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. So what I did is I put an Aputure Nova P300C kind of in the back right-hand corner of the frame, just outside of frame, kind of where that blue chair is, and I just pointed it right to the ceiling and just threw that into the ceiling and let that light color ceiling, that white color ceiling, just kind of reflect that light and just kind of give this nice exposure in that back corner. And then what I did is I put an Aputure Nova P300C just off of the left-hand frame that you can see here, kind of where that little bush is. And I put that into the ceiling, and the way that my ceiling is in that living room is it's kind of one of those vaulted ceilings. So I kind of threw the light into that vaulted ceiling, and that kind of also helped give a little bit more exposure on the key side of Tyler's face, while also just lifting of the exposure kind of on that front half of the room. And then I used a little Amaran P60C, and I just threw that, kind of bounced that light off the wall that's right outside of frame. And that's just giving a little bit of exposure on that couch right there, because otherwise it was just kind of, I was losing information in it because it's a pretty dark couch. So that's kind of what I did there to just lift the exposure of the room. Now on the shadow side of Tyler's face, what I did is I just hung a sound blanket to, number one, help with reverb, and also I used it as some negative fill, just because all that light that was reflecting was bouncing off another wall and giving a little bit too much fill for my liking. So I just used a little sound blanket to kind of cut that off and use as negative fill. Now that light in the back right hand corner that's throwing light into the ceiling is giving Tyler a nice little scratch on the shadow side of his face, just to kind of still give him a little bit of dimension there, so it's not looking super moody, but that negative fill definitely helped kind of balance out that contrast ratio I was going for. So that's what I did there, just to balance out the exposure to the room. And that's really important for interviews when you're lighting a big living room like this. If you want to match that window and make sure it's not overexposed, that's one thing. You got to have a pretty powerful light to be able to do that. But the other thing that you have to consider then is the exposure of that actual room. And typically you don't want to use any overhead lights, or in my case, I didn't even have overhead lights to use to lift the exposure of the room. So I had to rely completely on other artificial film lighting to be able to bring that exposure up, just to make it look a little bit more natural and all that kind of stuff. Now, the very back wall is a very plain wall, and we're still moving into this house, so we don't have anything up on that wall, like artwork or whatever. So I wanted to have something that just kind of give a little bit of splash of character, a little bit of texture on that back wall. So what I did is I used the Aputure Lightstorm 600D Pro with the Fresnel F10, and I just kind of put that up high and try to get a nice little steep little angle to that light, just to kind of mimic some afternoon sunlight or something like that coming into the room, into that back wall. So you can kind of see kind of on that window frame right there, and then just to the right of that, there's a little bit of the texture, some of the shadows from the window panes there, and then there's that splash of light that's hitting that back wall, and it's hitting that back lamp and just kind of casting these dramatic shadows. Now, one thing I really wish I would have done and had a little bit more time to set up is just kind of get that light on that back wall to just kind of stretch across the entire frame and resolve off frame instead of where it's cutting off right now. Not a huge deal, but for me, something's off about it, and I really wish that I could have stretched that light all the way across the rest of the frame, but I'm not even gonna go into why I couldn't do that, but that's what I would have changed. But otherwise, I'm really happy with how everything turned out. It looks really natural. Tyler's got a nice little catch light in his eyes, and it's just kind of got this like nice inviting feeling, but it's kind of got this like muted tone feel to it that I just think plays really well, and I think it looks really good. So anyways, that is pretty much it. That's the light. Those are all the lights that I used. I guess there's a practical in the back. Can't forget about practicals. And the rest of it was just set design. I kind of moved everything around in the living room just to kind of make it look a little bit better on camera. And that's another thing to consider, is a living room might look really good in person, but that doesn't mean it's gonna look really good on camera. So you might have to shift some things around when you are setting up and lighting for an interview. So that's pretty much it. Hope this wasn't too long. My voice is definitely going out now, so if there's any more information, I'll have to tell you about it in the comments, because my voice is on its way out. So I'm gonna enjoy my tea. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.